Do you have an annoying counterspell player inside of your pod that just doesn't let your big, bomby creatures like your Consecrated Sphinx resolve? Well, Hashaton, Scarab's Fist, may be the next commander for you. He gets around your opponents being able to counter your spells by just making token copies as a triggered ability whenever you discard a creature. Really powerful effect here, and there's some sweet synergies that you can throw into this deck. The most important part about this deck are ways to discard cards, because you need to discard cards so that way you can then make token copies of them. So, some of the ways you can do that include Invisible Garden. It's also card selection. However, your opponents will be able to capitalize on it as well. It's still good. Argentum Masticore. This one's pretty interesting. Whatever you discard becomes removal, and then you can reanimate it essentially with Hashaton by making a token. So I like this a lot in the deck. Plus, if you discard this, it's not a bad creature to create a token that's a copy of. Breathstealer's Crypt also affects everybody. However, you get to capitalize on it while your opponents do not. You can just choose to not pay 3 life when you're drawing a creature and discard it instead, and if you do, you can just pay 3 mana and boom, you have a token that's a copy of it. Collector's Vault. Card selection plus it makes you treasure. Crypt Breaker lets you create zombies by discarding cards, and it also lets you tap your zombies to draw cards, and it just so happens that Hashaton's token copies are zombies, so it works really nicely with Crypt Breaker. Cunning Lethomancer. Currency Converter, which has some additional synergies with Hashaton because Hashaton doesn't make you exile that card from the graveyard. If you discard a card, it doesn't matter where it goes. If you discard a card, it triggers. So you can discard it and then exile it to Currency Converter and then create a 2/2 black rogue creature token by tapping Currency Converter while still making that token copy with Hashaton. Dream Halls seems like the perfect card for this type of deck. It is universal, so your opponents will be able to capitalize on it, but I'm sure that you will be able to get bigger benefit than your opponents because your deck is going to be filled with big bomby creatures. You can discard one of those big bomby creatures to cast a different big bomby creature and then make a token that's a copy of the one you discarded with Hashaton. Beautiful. Love that. Dreamscape Artist. You can discard a creature card to Harrow and then make a token copy of it. So 6 mana, you ramp, and you make a token copy of whatever you would have discarded. Frantic Search. It untaps the 3 lands that you're going to need to be able to pay the cost on Hashaton. It's perfect. Ghostly Pilfer. It can even draw you cards. Haunted Dead. Jace's Archivist. Just being able to wheel everybody seems not too bad. Likeness Looter, just another way that you can draw a discard. Malcolm, similar, but if you ever get enough counters on Malcolm, you can just start playing those giant creatures for free. Mind Over Matter seems pretty powerful in this deck. You can use Mind Over Matter to untap one of the tokens that you create with Hashaton by discarding a creature and creating another token with Hashaton. Necrogoyf is pretty cool because you can also Madness it. It's a way to discard, and if you discard it, you can then cast it for its Madness cost while making a token copy of it, which I love that synergy. Ormos lets you discard 3 cards to draw 5. Overlord of the Flood Pits, it's a discard outlet that can even become a big creature that would be pretty nice to make a token copy of and or just impend and just cast normally. Pip-Boy 3000, just high utility card here that's also a discard outlet. Psychic Frog. Rafine, Scheming Seer, being able to connive is not bad. Rankle, Master of Pranks, we got the Prankle over here. Each player discards a card, perfect, and you can also use it as removal. Shorikai Genesis Engine lets you draw 2 cards, discard a card, and make a pilot, so it'll work well with token synergies. Scourge Familiar, which seems very, very good in this deck. I just really like Scourge Familiar. It's a way that you can discard cards to generate mana. And so you can discard 2 cards to pay for the 2 colorless on Hashaton, which is not too bad. It can just put in a lot of work in a deck like this. Looter Scooter, draw, discard, easy. Solitary Confinement is an interesting one. If you're able to draw a bunch of cards, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of big creatures you want to put in the deck that draw a ton of cards. Solitary Confinement's just a discard every turn, that also makes it so you can't be dealt damage and have Shroud, so that's not too shabby. Teferi, Master of Time, a planeswalker that lets you loot on every turn, very nice. And Zombie Infestation, discard cards to make zombies. Perfect for this deck, especially if you lean into that zombie synergy or if you're leaning into token synergies. Those were all repeatable ways of discarding cards. There's a few other ways I wanted to mention that are not repeatable. They're one-shot discards, but they're very powerful effects. Ancient Excavation. Also pretty nice is that you can basic land cycling this, so you can use this as a card to discard if you wanted to, and go and get a land that you may need. Awaken the Erstwhile works well in token synergies, zombie synergies, and it ruins your opponent's days. Bizarre Trade Mage. Bitter Triumph and Bone Shards is discard on removal, which is pretty good. Careful Study, Chart a Course, Dark Deal, Faithful Mending, Kiora the Rising Tide. I really like this in the deck because you'll also very likely be able to start pooping out Krakens. And Windfall. There's also a handful of creatures that just let you discard them to themselves, which is really nice because they have an ability that lets you just, discard from your hand, then you pay to make a token that's a copy of it, and you get the benefit of whatever you discarded it for. You have, like, Alabaster Host Intercessor. This one's pretty nice because it's removal. Angel of Ruins, more removal. Eagles of the North, Eternal Dragon, Monstrosity of the Lake, and Troll of Khazad-dûm. Archfiend of Ifnir is a really nice one. It's also really powerful in the deck because you're going to be discarding so many cards. It'll act as a one-sided board wipe often. Curator of Mysteries, it can let you scry a bunch. Draenith Healer to gain back some life. Gempalm Polluter, which can end up being just a win con in this deck if you make enough zombies, especially if you're leaning into the zombie theme. Harvester of Misery, which I absolutely love in this deck. You can pay 2 mana to discard it to give a creature -2/-2, and then pay 3 mana to make a token copy of it to give all creatures -2/-2. So you can kill all the small things, and one creature that's a little bigger being 4 power or less because of that initial -2/-2. And Horror of the Broken Lands. This just gets pretty big and could deal a lot of damage pretty easily. With all this discarding, you're going to want cards that synergize with you throwing cards into your graveyard. Cards that give you some extra benefits because you're going to need them. Bone Miser. If you're discarding creature cards, this makes more zombie tokens, which works really beautifully in the deck. Containment Construct can let you actually cast the creature that you discard, so you can have the original and the token copy, which is nice. Drakehaven can just poop out drakes. Dying to Serve, more zombies. Faith of the Devoted can drain your opponents out pretty quickly. Feast of Sanity, I like this one a lot. It just lets you gain a lot of life and deal a lot of damage to any target. Lassatep Chancellor, more zombie creation. Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer, another way to cast the cards that you discard. The Raven Man can generate tokens. And to lose, so you can get back whatever cards you discarded to then discard them again and make more tokens. Moving on, let's talk about creatures that seem worthwhile to discard. Creatures that, like, you wouldn't mind having a 4/4 token copy of them for 3 mana. Agent of Treachery. Just discard this, pay 3 mana, steal something. Love that. Ancient Brass Dragon, Ancient Gold Dragon, and Ancient Silver Dragon all have combat damage triggers and are flyers, and those triggers are pretty strong. These seem like no-brainers in the deck. Angel of Serenity is a good removal piece, which could also get you back some of the creatures that you discarded previously, so then you can discard them again. Archon of Cruelty, one of the best reanimation targets that exist in Magic. Astral Dragon, I love this card, and it works really well in this deck. At the very worst, it gives you a bunch of extra lands. Avacyn, Angel of Hope, I mean, your stuff being indestructible seems like pretty worthwhile for 3 mana. Blazing Archon's fun. Consecrated Sphinx to draw all the cards. Drogskull Reaver. The token is actually just better than the actual card. This will draw you a ton of cards. I love this. There's not a lot of decks that I like Drogskull Reaver in, but this is definitely one of them. Elish Norn, just a very oppressive card. Emeria Shepherd, which can also reanimate the things that you discard, which, amazing. Grave Titan also leans into the whole zombie thing. Hullbreaker Horror along with Tidespout Tyrant can be very powerful pieces. Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur, your opponents can't have hands and you draw 7 cards at your end step. Love that, especially because you'll have to discard down to hand size. When you're discarding the hand size, you can just discard more creatures to make tokens of. There's also Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant, copy your stuff. Kozilek the Great Distortion is another bomby creature that gives you a discard outlet, and that discard outlet is strong. Overlord of the Mistmoors fits really well into the token theme. Rhea Dawnbringer, another reanimator. Sarah's Emissary, just name creatures and you're in a very good spot. Shieldred can again reanimate some of the stuff that you discard. Sire 7 Deaths, just keyword soup on a dude, don't mind that. Sphinx of the Second Sun, who doesn't want an additional beginning phase? Ulamog's Dreadsire can just pump out 10/10s. Ulamog that ceases hunger to just mill your opponent's libraries. Valgavoth, just huge splashy effect on this guy. Villas, another just big splashy demon. And Voidwinter, great hate card. As I just mentioned with a few of those creatures, you can reanimate the things that get discarded. Hashaton does not care where they go after they're discarded. As long as they are discarded, you'll be able to make a token copy of that creature. He doesn't require you to exile the original creature, which means that creature just ends up in your graveyard. So a little reanimate can come along and say, hey, come on back, hop up on the battlefield, and now you got 2 of those things, the original and a token copy. Insane. I love that. So good. Let's talk about ways to reanimate things. There's Animate Dead, Incarnation Technique, Karmic Guide, Metamorphosis Fanatic. I really like the creatures that can reanimate because you can discard them to make a token copy of them to bring back the original to then bring back something else. It's just pretty cool. Persist, Sister Hospitaller, Tortured Existence, which might be just the best card in this whole deck. It is insane. Choose and discard a creature card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can pay essentially 4 mana to swap a creature from your hand in your graveyard and then make a token of the one that was in your hand. And so every 4 mana that you have, you can flip them back and forth and make tokens. That is so good. Definitely the best card for Hashaton. You need this card in your Hashaton deck. And then Unburial Rites. This deck is secretly just a token deck. You're making a lot of tokens, so you might as well run cards that synergize well with tokens. Anointed Procession and O'Hare Talk to double or triple your token production. Caretaker's Talent, fabulous here. Intangible Virtue to give your zombies +1/+1 and Vigilance. Junkwinder can tap things down for extended periods of time if you continue to make tokens, which I love. Campbell, Profiteering Mayor, can drain out your opponents, especially with Mirkwood Bats in there as well. And then Ocelot Pride to, again, double up those tokens. Love that. One of the options that you have when building this deck is to lean heavier into zombies. There's a lot of good zombie synergy cards that exist in Magic. You're going to be making a bunch of zombie tokens with this commander. So if you wanted to run some of those zombie synergy cards, it would make some sense. Cemetery Reaper, give them +1/+1. Champion of the Parish can get pretty big. Corpse Knight is just a good way to drain out your opponents. Death Baron, +1/+1 plus Death Touch. Diregraph Captain, more +1/+1 and more drain. Diregraph Colossus can generate a bunch of extra tokens and get really big. Endless Ranks of the Dead can make your board state very large. Gleaming Overseer is perfect in here because your tokens are all zombies, so you can give them Hexproof and Menace, which, oh my god, this should be in the deck no matter what, even if you're not trying to make it a zombie deck. God Eternal Oketra, just more big token creation. Gravecrawler, just good recursive creature here. Headless Rider's pretty nice, along with Kindred Discovery to draw cards. Lord of the Accursed, Lord of the Undead, Midnight Reaper, more card draw. Necro Duality, copy your zombies. Same thing with Reflections of Litjara. Roaming Throne probably should be in the deck no matter what. You copy your Hashaton triggers, so you do still need to pay 3 again for the additional trigger, but it's still not bad. It's still like you get to do it twice if you want to. But then all of the creatures that you're creating token copies of, if they have triggered abilities, Roaming Throne will see them because they are also zombies. Rooftop Storm, cast your zombies for free. Rot Hulk, pretty cool card. Shepherd of Rot is a good way to actually finish your opponents off. The Scarab God, Undead War Chief, Verena Lich Queen, which I am a huge fan of. I used to have a Verena deck, and it seems pretty good in here because it's even a discard outlet, which works really well. Warren Soul Trader, nice sack outlet. Wayward Servant, Wilhelt, Zombie Apocalypse, and Zombie Master. Lastly, I want to talk about a few one-off cards. These just didn't fit into the other categories, but they seem really good in the deck. Amulet of Vigor, so that way your tokens enter untapped. Delny, Hashaton is only 1 power, so being able to copy that trigger seems pretty good. Joe Grant, interesting card here. It essentially makes it so you can discard all of your legendary creatures via cycling, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It works really well in this deck. It's essentially a discard outlet, which I really like. Oversold Cemetery, Phyrexian Reclamation, and Sword of Light and Shadow can all get creatures back from your graveyard to your hand to be discarded once again. I think that's a very powerful effect, and you'll probably want a handful of ways to do that. And lastly, Shadow of the Grave. Really nice if you have a big turn where you discard a lot of things all at once. So you can just get them all back right away. That is everything I have for Hashaton Scarab's Fist. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.